Okay, could everyone please mute yourself before we begin? Okay, so hopefully the PowerPoint is showing. Can everybody see the PowerPoint all right? Okay, so today's lecture is entitled Tchaikovsky and the Law. And what we're going to do today is think about and look at Tchaikovsky's life, but specifically his life as a law student and as a young legal official. And through that, ask what we as law students, for the law students in the audience, or as lawyers, for those of us who are lawyers, can learn about his life. I will give the customary disclaimers that I gave in my first law and music lecture, which is I am not a professional musicologist. I'm not a music professor. I'm not a Tchaikovsky scholar. I'm a law professor, but I'm interested in music. I've studied music before, and I assume that all of you are interested in music or are also fellow Tchaikovsky lovers as well. So hopefully this lecture will still be interesting to you. Okay. Before I begin, I'd like to play an audio clip just to get us started. Okay. So if you'll bear with me, let me just see how I do this here. Okay. Okay, I think many of you have heard this piece. This is, of course, Tchaikovsky's famous Piano Concerto No. 1. And this is the beginning, the part of the beginning of the first movement. And I'd like to begin with this piece because, first of all, it's so recognizable. And it also represents Tchaikovsky at the heart, at the height of his fame. Okay, so you can see here on this slide, this piece was performed under Tchaikovsky's conducting in his America tour in the 1890s. Tchaikovsky was invited by Carnegie Hall, what we now call Carnegie Hall in the United States. But he was chosen as the composer of honor to help open the new music hall in New York City that was founded by Andrew Carnegie, the famous American philanthropist and businessman. And Tchaikovsky really was at the height of this fame. He was an international celebrity of sorts. He was revered as a composer across Europe, across America, and of course, in his native Russia as well. And you can see here, on this slide are just some photos. You can see here on the top is Carnegie Hall in the late 19th century, so around the time when Tchaikovsky was there. And then you can see here, this is the interior of the music hall in 1891. And then at the bottom here, I've included photos of what Carnegie Hall looks like today. Okay, so this piece, Piano Concerto No. 1, so famous, so recognizable to everybody. I think many of you can hum the melody. That piece really represents Tchaikovsky at the height of his fame. And it was one of the pieces, as I mentioned, that was featured in the concerts to open this new music hall. Tchaikovsky conducted, and a German pianist was the soloist. Okay. And here we have, just to show you just how famous Tchaikovsky was really at this time, in his trip to the US in the 1890s. You can see on the left here, this is a promotional poster that Carnegie Hall had published to sort of get everybody excited about the new opening of the music hall. And you can see, let me use my mouse here, Tchaikovsky's here at the top. And then here on the right, we have Tchaikovsky. This is from a this is from a poster that was produced by Carnegie Hall with Tchaikovsky's portrait. Okay. Now here, let me just provide some excerpts really from Tchaikovsky himself talking about his trip to America. Okay. And you can see on the first bullet point, Tchaikovsky himself was very impressed with the welcome that he had received. Right? So he wrote, I had a royal welcome. All of today's papers carry an account of my arrival, complete with a portrait. America knows me better than Europe. Okay. And then he was also impressed with Americans. This is one of perhaps the most humorous lines from Tchaikovsky here. Extraordinary people, these Americans, having been accustomed to Paris, where any advances or any friendly act by a stranger feels like an attempt at exploitation. If there are any French people in the audience, probably that's quite offensive, right? But Tchaikovsky wrote that. The frankness, sincerity, generosity, and cordiality without any ulterior motive and readiness to oblige and to fuss here is simply astounding and altogether touching. And so he was touched by Americans as well. And then the third bullet point deals with the piano concerto, the excerpt, part of which we just heard, my concerto in an excellent performance by Adelaide Auster-Oy went magnificently. I have never managed to rouse such enthusiasm in Russia. I was called for endlessly with cries of upwards and waving of handkerchiefs. In short, it was evident that I am indeed loved by the Americans. The orchestra's enthusiasm was especially precious to me. So the point I'm just trying to make is, Tchaikovsky really 1891, the height of his fame, loved in America. And as I mentioned, in Russia, he was also a celebrity. He was supported and by the monarchy, by the Russian Tsar. Tsar Alexander III gave him rewards and even awarded him a lifetime pension, government pension, in honor of Tchaikovsky's contributions to music. And he really had a global reputation. And in fact, many of the pieces of Tchaikovsky that I think we are all familiar with and that many of you may also love, such as the Nutcracker Suite, which is from 1892, his Sixth Symphony, which is also labeled the Pathétique Symphony, that's from 1893, the Fifth Symphony, which is also very popular, 1888, Sleeping Beauty, 1889. Many of his most famous works come from this late period in his life. But today I want to do something different. I don't want to focus on this part of his life. I want to sort of go back earlier. I want to take a look at Tchaikovsky's early life, his life as a child, and more importantly, for purposes of our lecture today, his life as a student studying law, and then his life as a legal official, and take a look at that. Okay. So, Tchaikovsky was born in 1840 in Russia. He was from a well-to-do family. His family is often described by scholars as from the lesser nobility or the lower aristocracy in Russia. So very well-to-do, not the top nobles, but certainly still very well-to-do. I guess in Chinese history, maybe one approximation may be the Shi class. So for our Chinese students here, of course, Confucius, Kongzi, right? He eventually became part of the Shi class, and Confucius was born into a lower aristocratic family. So maybe something similar to the Shi class in Chinese history. But anyway, Tchaikovsky was born into a well-to-do family. And here I have on the slide, you guys can see a photo of his family, and I've labeled it as well, so you can see all of his family members here. And you can see Tchaikovsky here on the left, age 8. I'll start with his father here, Ilya Tchaikovsky, here sitting down here on the right. And Ilya Tchaikovsky had a civil service background and engineering background. He was an engineer by training, specifically worked as a mining engineer, and had various important positions during his career: mining engineer, a factory manager, a manager of ironworks. And then here, sitting here in the middle, Tchaikovsky's mother, Alexandra, with whom Tchaikovsky had a very, very close relationship. Okay, and she had some French blood in her. Okay? And then you can see Tchaikovsky's various siblings. Okay, I'll just point out a couple that we will also talk about today. Here you have Nikolai, Tchaikovsky's older brother. Nikolai will eventually follow in his father's footsteps and also become a mining engineer. We have here, we'll also talk about briefly Tchaikovsky's sister, a younger sister here, Alexandra, who Tchaikovsky referred to affectionately by her nickname, Sasha. Okay. So we will also, in today's lecture, take a look at some of the letters between Tchaikovsky and Sasha. Okay. And we also have here in the photo Tchaikovsky's half-sister, his half-sister from his father's first marriage. Okay. His younger brother here, and not pictured, I thought I would also mention, because they were born after this photo was taken. Tchaikovsky also had two younger brothers who were twins, Modest Tchaikovsky and Anatoly Tchaikovsky. Modest Tchaikovsky is quite important because later on he puts together essentially a biography, a biographical study of his brother, Tchaikovsky, the composer who we are talking about today. And so this is sort of his early life. Now we know that Tchaikovsky did have early exposure to music. His family, his mother in particular, was musical. She played the piano. She also sang and introduced him to what we call today classical music. Okay? And it is during Tchaikovsky's youth that he starts to get very interested in music. We know that he took piano lessons. We know he had talent, natural talent for music. One of the first important influences on Tchaikovsky's life in terms of music is the Russian composer Mikhail Glinka, okay, who you can see on the slide here, and his portrait there. Mikhail Glinka, one of the most important Russian composers from the early 19th century, regarded by many scholars today as the father of Russian music, somebody who was able to take very quintessentially Russian tunes and folk songs and combined them with Western/Germanic musical structures, and a very important figure in Russian musical history. We know that when Tchaikovsky was younger, okay, his mother took him to a performance. I think the date is about 1850 or so. So when Tchaikovsky was about 10 years old, we know that his mother took him to a performance of the opera A Life for the Tsar, one of Glinka's major operas. It's also known as Ivan Susanin. Okay, I apologize for any Russian speakers in the audience, because if I'm mispronouncing any Russian terms, but we know that Tchaikovsky's mother took him to listen to this opera and to watch it. And Tchaikovsky later said that this opera was very, very influential on his desire to pursue music. Indeed, Tchaikovsky later referred to Glinka as the cornerstone of Russian music. Okay? And this opera by Mikhail Glinka is sort of a historical, sort of nationalist type opera about a 17th century patriotic hero, Ivan Susanin, who defends the Tsar from invading Poles in the 17th century. So just to get us in the mood, I wanted to play you an excerpt from this opera. This is a part of the last final song in the opera, entitled Slavsia, which is often translated in English as glory or be glorious. Let's take a listen to it. And I think it's good to get us in the mood, because you can imagine Tchaikovsky sitting there, a 10-year-old boy, watching this opera, listening to this music, and just sort of the kind of influence it had on him. So let me just play you a short clip from this. Okay, so just thank you for everybody's patience as well with the technical issues. Okay, so, all right. So a very riveting, a very powerful piece, right? Even if when we hear it today, it sort of makes you want to stand up and sing as well. Incidentally, this song is one of Russia's most notable patriotic songs as well, and is often sang and performed even today. So you can imagine the young Tchaikovsky sitting there with his mother, listening to this music and feeling catalyzed and encouraged with his interest in music even deepened as a result. Okay. Now, his parents exposed him to music, but they were not necessarily that interested in having Tchaikovsky pursue music as a career. Okay. And part of this reason can be expressed probably, I have a quote here on the slide by Anton Rubinstein, who was the head of the St. Petersburg Conservatory of Music, which Tchaikovsky will later enroll in. And he says here, quote, "It was obvious that in Russia, the profession of musical artist, a profession that defined the position in society of a person who had devoted his whole life to his art and music, did not exist." In other words, many people believed at the time, especially among the nobility, that music, yes, music is great. We love to go to performances. We love to go to concerts, but it is not really a respectable profession, especially for somebody from the nobility. Okay, I don't think this is something unique to Tchaikovsky. Even today, right? I'm sure there are many people, perhaps parents or so, right? If their child said, "I want to be a professional musician," or "I want to be a professional artist," parents might get a little bit nervous whether or not that could make for a stable career. But his parents did expose him to music, although they were not necessarily sold on Tchaikovsky pursuing music as a full-time career. Okay, so what did they do? Well, they thought, go study law. The law is a respectable profession. And we have many law students in the audience. Specifically, not just study law, but become a civil servant, become a government official. Why? Because it's a respectable profession. As a member of the nobility, it's also a very stable job. Okay? And so his parents decided to enroll Tchaikovsky in the Russian Imperial School of Jurisprudence, which was located in St. Petersburg. Of course, St. Petersburg at that time is the capital of Russia. And we know that Tchaikovsky studied there from 1852 to 1859. Now, before we get into Tchaikovsky's individual experience at this school, I thought it would be helpful if we could just go over some background about this school itself. And what was the program like there? What was its history? So on this slide, I've summarized some of the key points about the Imperial School of Jurisprudence. It was founded in 1835, and its founding statute said very clearly that the purpose of the Imperial School of Jurisprudence was to train noble youth for service in the state judiciary. Okay? There's an official at the time who gave an even more specific explanation about the goal and aim of the school. And I have it here on the slide. You can see the official says the aim was, quote, not only to educate the rising generation, but to instruct it in the spirit of Christ, of love and devotion to the Tsar and fatherland, of honor and duty, and to train it for orderly and systematic work. So I think it's very clear that this school is not just about law training, but to train people to become officials, and specifically nobles. We know it was a 7-year program. Okay? So for our students at STL, STL is probably one of the longest programs, right, in China, 4 years for our JD and JM program. At the Imperial School of Jurisprudence, students studied 7 years. Male students, only male students were enrolled from ages 12 to 19. Okay? New students were accepted every year. And the total student population for the Imperial School of Jurisprudence was about 210 to 270 students. And it was a boarding school type program, meaning students had to live on site on the school premises in the boarding school. Okay. From what we know today, Tchaikovsky had to endure a very, very rigorous and difficult study curriculum. Students had an average of 7 hours of class a day, 6 days a week, working from about 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. at night. And the only times they really had off were Sundays, holidays, and sometimes the school would designate special days off, especially if you were in your last year. They might allow you to take some time off. For our students at STL who are here, you can maybe empathize with Tchaikovsky, because many of our students here, you guys I know have class every day, even on Saturdays sometimes. So Tchaikovsky would have also have had class on Saturdays. In fact, our students at STL, you guys may be even more hardworking, because I know sometimes you even have to have class on Sundays as well. But anyway, we know it was a very difficult program indeed. In terms of the curriculum, a 7-year curriculum. The first 4 years were what we might call today a more liberal arts curriculum, followed by 3 years of more specialized courses in law. So I've listed some of the courses that we know were offered at the Imperial School of Jurisprudence on this slide. Latin, French. Of course, French, very important, because French in the 19th century was sort of the language of diplomacy, the language of sophistication. German, physics, natural history, mathematics, geography, literature, religion, Roman law, state law, civil law, criminal law, financial law, comparative law, police studies, judicial practice and procedure, forensic medicine, political economy, and local law, sometimes also translated as local regulations. So you can see it's a very full program indeed of legal study and also non-legal study. This next slide here, I have just so you can see, visualize the Imperial School of Jurisprudence. The top two photos, if you can see, are the Imperial School of Jurisprudence from in the 1890s. Obviously, this is after when Tchaikovsky was there, but probably accurate as to what it was like when he was a student there. You can see it's sitting on the banks of the river here, and here's a photo of the interior. And I thought it would be interesting for everyone to see what it looks like today. So here is a photo of the building today. You can see it almost looks the same. Obviously, there are some differences. The flag, of course, is different, the Russian Federation flag. But you can see basically it looks the same. And today it houses the Leningrad, or it's called the Leningrad County Court, or the county court for the region of St. Petersburg and Leningrad. Okay? So the building is still in use today. Here on the lower right, I have you can see a painting done of the Hall of School of Jurisprudence from 1840 by the Russian artist Sergei Zaryanko. And you can see all of the students are in uniform, okay? These black long sleeve uniforms, okay? So, Tchaikovsky's admission to the school. Now that we have some background about the school, we can go on and talk a little bit about Tchaikovsky and his experience there. He passed his entrance examinations in May of 1852. He was one of 60 applicants that were competing for 33 vacancies. I guess not too bad of an acceptance rate, right? So that would be what, 50% acceptance rate, but nevertheless, he passed his entrance examinations. And as a school which only admitted nobles, basically, his parents also had to send an application and guarantee his finances. So I thought it would be interesting to show you all some of the actual documents from that period. So here on this slide you can see the application from his mother to the board of the school. Okay, so his mother had to also fill out an application. You guys can see here, quote, "I hereby apply for the admission of my son, Pyotr, to the preparatory class of the Imperial School of Jurisprudence, in support of which I certify that he has reached the required age and that he will be financially fully self-supporting. I enclose the following supporting documents: birth and baptism certificate, certificate of noble descent. That's important because the school generally only admitted nobles, people of noble birth. Certificate of smallpox vaccination and state of health. I respectfully request that he be granted admission to the class in question." Okay. September 11th, 1850. Not unlike, I guess, applications today. Schools today wouldn't require a certificate of noble descent, right? But many schools now require a certificate of COVID vaccination. Okay, so that's there. And you can see in the second bullet point, his father also had to make commitments. Tchaikovsky's father also had to make commitments. And here's a commitment that Tchaikovsky's father made. Quote, "I, the undersigned, Ilya Petrovich Tchaikovsky, Major General of the Corps of Mining Engineers, retired." So remember, his father worked as a mining engineer, permanently resident in St. Petersburg, right? Care of Major General Nikolaev, hereby undertake to pay annually and not later than August 1st, the sum of 450 rubles silver to cover the entire cost of the maintenance of my son Pyotr upon his admission to the Imperial School of Jurisprudence for the duration of his attendance thereat. In the event of his expulsion therefrom, I undertake to assume full financial responsibility for him thereafter. August 24th, 1852. Now, in terms of Tchaikovsky's life in school, we know that he continued his love of music. And we know that he was involved in music extracurricular activities and attended opera performances. Because again, the school located in St. Petersburg, the center of Russian politics and culture, there were plenty of opportunities for Tchaikovsky to pursue his musical interests when he didn't have class. We also know that he sang in the choir. He had a very high voice, so I think at first he was put in the soprano group, and he took piano lessons on Sundays. And he later would share, looking back on his time at school, he later would say that his time in the choir was one of the happiest times and one of the things that he loved most about his time at the Imperial School. Now, one of the important musical influences on Tchaikovsky at the time he was a student at the Imperial School of Jurisprudence was Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, the famous Austrian composer, and specifically Mozart's opera Don Giovanni. And we know that Tchaikovsky went to see Don Giovanni, a performance of Mozart's opera Don Giovanni, when he was 16. So in other words, when he was a student at the Imperial School. And we know that for Tchaikovsky, Mozart was one of his musical heroes. And he would later tell many people, looking back on his time in the Imperial School, that this experience, right, of Mozart really affected him deeply. Now, Tchaikovsky knew about Mozart even before the time he was at Imperial School of Jurisprudence. When he was a young child, his parents exposed him to Mozart. But he signals and he singles out this specific operatic experience when he was 16. I don't have this on the slide, I'll just tell it to you. But for example, in 1893, the last year of his life, Tchaikovsky gave an interview with a newspaper. And he said in the interview that he still remembered that he was 16 when he first heard Mozart's Don Giovanni. And he refers to this as a revelation. And he said, quote, "I am not capable of describing the overwhelming power of the impression that I experienced," end quote. And he would later also share in a letter to his patron, Nadezhda von Meck, in March 1878. I have this on the slide. He said, quote, to her in this letter to his patroness, Nadezhda von Meck, quote, "The music of Don Giovanni was the first music which produced a tremendous impression on me. It awoke a holy enthusiasm in me which would later bear fruit. Through this music, I entered that world of artistic beauty inhabited only by the greatest geniuses. It is to Mozart that I am obliged for the fact that I have dedicated my life to music." Remember, this letter is from 1878, so he's looking back at his time in the Imperial School. "Mozart gave the first impulse to my musical powers and made me love music more than anything else in the world." Okay, so to get us into the mood of Tchaikovsky, let's listen to another musical excerpt now. This is an excerpt from Mozart's opera Don Giovanni, an aria, a song entitled Vedre Carino. I have it on the slide here. English translation about "Come, shall I tell thee?" And we know that Tchaikovsky was deeply moved, especially by this aria. So let's just listen to it. And we can see perhaps what Tchaikovsky was feeling and thinking when he was listening to Don Giovanni. Okay. So a short excerpt from the aria. I feel very bad about cutting these clips short because we could listen to them for the entire lecture, and they're much more beautiful than what I'm saying. Right? But anyway, this is the kind of aria that really touched Tchaikovsky. Okay, now besides going to opera, besides taking music lessons, piano lessons, besides singing in the choir, we also know that Tchaikovsky composed. So one of the things that he kept up, his hobbies, his musical hobbies when he was a law student, was composition. And I have here on the slide, there are two pieces, at least two pieces we know of, that he wrote when he was in the Imperial School of Jurisprudence. The first piece is entitled, as you can see on the slide, Anastasia Waltz, English translation, a waltz dedicated to Anastasia Petrova. Anastasia Petrova was one of Tchaikovsky's, I think the English term is governess. So basically it's like a private teacher, noble families hired to teach young children subjects. Right, so sort of like in Chinese, it would be what we call today a 家庭教师, someone a teacher that you hire to come to your home and teach your child lessons and things like that. But he had wonderful memories of his governess, Petrova, and he wrote this waltz in dedication to her. And this was written in 1854, and it was written for solo piano. Okay, so I thought, why don't we take a listen to it? Okay, now the structure of the piece, it's a waltz, and you'll hear the first part is like the introduction, which builds up eventually to the main theme of the waltz. Okay. Okay, so everyone can hear the structure, right? This first part is sort of the intro. Tchaikovsky writes this short introduction. That builds up the tension, it builds up the excitement, right? We're waiting for, we want the waltz to begin, right? And then he gives it to us, right? The main melody, this one. I mean, I think most music critics today, they say it's a simple piece, but it's actually quite nice, right? It's quite lovely, written when he was 14. And even in this early piece, we can see sort of early examples of Tchaikovsky's talent, first of all, in writing great melodies, okay, which he's very famous for, but also in his waltzes later on, he masters this technique of that introduction section, right? Building up the excitement, building up the tension. He's a master at doing that, and then giving us the main theme of the waltz. So even at age 14, this piece he wrote at the Imperial School of Jurisprudence, we can see that. To give you a musical example of what I'm talking about, let me just play you a couple of more clips. Now, this is not from his early life, but for example, take a listen to a very famous waltz that he wrote, of course, much later in his life, the Sleeping Beauty piece, but the waltz from that piece. And you can also, the introduction part, right? And then the waltz part, right? That's the kind of the introductory part. Remember, in the Anastasia Valse, he also had a short introductory part. But of course, Tchaikovsky is a mature composer now, right? But you can see it's the kind of the same, his talent for writing these things. And then, of course, we get into the main waltz theme of Sleeping Beauty. So I think everybody here has heard this piece before, and it may be on your list of favorites, right? So just one more example. This is the waltz from his opera Eugene Onegin. And again, listen to Tchaikovsky's real talent in writing this introductory part and then getting into the waltz. Okay, just like he did when he was 14 and doing the Anastasia Valse piece. Okay, I should just make clear that this kind of structural approach, intro and then the main theme, it's nothing new with Tchaikovsky, but one can see that he's really brilliant at doing this, right? At building the excitement and then getting into the theme. So just one more example. This is the waltz from Eugene Onegin, his opera Eugene Onegin. So again, you'll hear the intro and then you'll have the waltz part. Oh, sorry. Okay, and then we get into the theme, the main waltz. Okay, so I just wanted to do that brief musical detour and to show you there are even certain connections really in Tchaikovsky's approach of composition, even this early when he was 14 and writing this Anastasia Valse. Another piece which survives from his time in the Imperial School of Jurisprudence is Tchaikovsky's song. He wrote a song, the English translation of which is entitled My Genius, My Angel, My Friend. It's on the slide, the last bullet point here. It's a song he wrote for piano and voice in the 1850s. We know at the time he was in school. The lyrics he took from a poem written by the Russian poet Afanasy Fet. And we know that he wrote this song for a classmate of his, a very close classmate friend of his. Okay, and you can see the lyrics there on the slide. My genius, my angel, my friend, do you speak to me calmly and calmly hover about and bestow timid inspiration and treat my sweet ailment and bring peaceful slumber. Okay. I'll just play a short excerpt from that song so you can also listen to it. So we'll stop the clip there, but those are two pieces you can listen to from his time at the Imperial School. He graduated in 1859. Tchaikovsky was a very good student. We know that he graduated at the top 10% of his class in terms of grade. We even have a record of his grades. And so if you guys are interested, I've included here an English translation of the Certificate of Graduation of Peter Ilyich Tchaikovsky from the Imperial School of Jurisprudence. Quote, the board of the school hereby certify that the student of this school, P.I. Tchaikovsky, has demonstrated good behavior and met the requirements in the following subjects with the following grades. I'm not going to read every course out loud, but here I've made a table of the grades. If you guys can see it on the slide, divine law, very good. Canon law, excellent. State law, very good. Civil law, excellent. Criminal law, excellent. Surveying law, land surveying, I guess similar to what we call land law today, or property, very good. Local regulations, excellent. Roman law, excellent. Encyclopedia of Jurisprudence, excellent. History of Russian law, excellent. Financial law, excellent. Forensic medicine, excellent. French, excellent. The lowest grades are in what? Mathematics and physics. I can empathize with that because those are also, math was my lowest grade in college. Okay, so I was never really good at math, but the general point is you can see Tchaikovsky did very well, okay? And therefore, you can see here the certificate of graduation says, therefore, in accordance with this imperial charter of the institution, the rank of 9th class is hereby conferred. In witness thereof, he is awarded this certificate duly signed and sealed. And so Tchaikovsky graduates. I have this bullet point here on the slide just to let you know that later in his life, Tchaikovsky continued his relationship with his alma mater, with his school, because he was commissioned by his school, the Imperial School of Jurisprudence, to compose a march to celebrate the school's jubilee, or the school's 50th, 50 anniversary in 1885. Now, the funny thing is, we know that Tchaikovsky, he accepted because I guess he felt that he had an obligation as a, as a校友, as an alumnus of the school to do it. So he accepted the commission, but we know that he hated doing this. For example, in letters that he wrote to his friends, in one letter he said, I don't have this on the slide, I'll just tell you. In one letter he said, quote, writing such a thing, this march, is deeply boring and disagreeable. Yet on the other, it would be awkward to refuse. Okay, so he wasn't very thrilled to do this. And even more humorous, or in another letter to another friend, he wrote, because after he submitted the march, the school invited him, obviously, please come to our 50th anniversary and you can see the performance of your march. And Tchaikovsky wrote this letter to his friend, Vladimir Stasov, a friend and colleague, in 1885. He wrote, quote, I very much do not want to be present at the festivities, if only because the march that I was commissioned to write shall be performed, and to hear it would be excruciating for me, unquote. So let me play you a clip of the march, okay? And I'm not a music critic, but I think one can safely say if you listen to this march, you can also get a sense that Tchaikovsky really didn't like writing it, because if you listen to it and you compare it with other pieces he wrote in the 1880s, masterpieces and stuff, you could tell that this composition, he did it, but he wasn't really inspired about it. Let me just play you part of it so you can listen to it. This is called the Jurisprudence March. Sometimes it's translated in English as the Jurists' March, okay? In case any of you want to look it up later. Okay, so that's a clip from the Jurist March. I remember, I think one music critic online wrote that, you listen to this piece, it's perfectly fine. It's a march, but, I think one music critic described it as just sort of a generic march that, you just hear at graduation ceremonies or parties, right? And that probably reflects the fact that Tchaikovsky wasn't really that interested in doing this, but he still did it out of a sense of obligation to his school. Okay. Now, after he graduated, by the way, here is a photo of his graduation, the class of 1859, and Tchaikovsky is here. Okay, front row, sixth from the right. Okay, but you can see his classmates, and again, they're wearing that uniform that you saw in the painting that I showed you earlier from the Imperial School. Okay, so after graduating, he begins work as a legal official, and we know that he joined the Ministry of Justice in St. Petersburg 5 days after graduation. He had a minimum service obligation of 4 years. Okay, we know that Tchaikovsky was actually very diligent. He was hardworking, and he was liked by his bosses. In one report, evaluation, one boss of Tchaikovsky described him this way: Tchaikovsky shows, quote, a constant diligence and exact fulfilling of obligations, unquote, end quote. Now, as I wrote on the slide here, his brother, Modest Tchaikovsky, tells a different story. A Modest Tchaikovsky claims that Tchaikovsky, because he didn't really like the job that much, he wasn't that hardworking, he was very bored sometimes, and Tchaikovsky's brother Modest tells this story where Tchaikovsky was so bored that this official document, he started chewing on it, literally chewing and eating it. And then by the time he realized he had chewed it, it had to be redrafted. Okay. Now, we don't know if that story is 100% true, but I just wanted to let you know that there are different stories out there, and his brother tells this story. But what did Tchaikovsky do at the Ministry of Justice? He was a clerk, and his job included reviewing complaints that were sent to the ministry's petition desk from all over Russia, from gentry, from merchants, from serfs, all different classes. I think the closest in Chinese history for our Chinese students here is in China, of course, there's a petition office too, the process of shangfang, right, petitioning. So you can think of Tchaikovsky as a legal official who dealt with petitions. We know that he handled hundreds of cases. Probably one scholar estimates that Tchaikovsky in his first 2 years handled around 265 cases. So, clearly somebody working hard, but his heart was still set on music and pursuing music as a full-time career. And his bosses did recommend him for promotion from the 9th to 8th grade. So just to give you some background, the Russian civil service at the time had 14 grades, 14 lowest and 1 the highest. And Tchaikovsky started at 9 after graduation, and he was being recommended for a promotion to 8th. In Chinese history, the analogy would be, in Chinese history, you have the 九品制, right? The 9-rank system in traditional China, where officials are ranked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And of course, there are 1A, 1B. There are sub-rankings. In Russia at this time, it's not 9, but it's 14. And there's some evidence to suggest that Tchaikovsky wasn't very satisfied with this. He thought he should deserve a higher promotion, but this may have also led him further to music. And one of the interesting things is we can see Tchaikovsky's thinking, his decision to switch from a law career, an official career, to a musical career by looking at his letters to his younger sister, Sasha. So you remember the photo, the family photo, Alexandra, his younger sister, who he affectionately called Sasha. He shared with her his desire to study, to pursue music. So for example, in 1862, he wrote to her, I have it on the slide here. Last year, as you know, I studied the theory of music very hard, and now I'm absolutely convinced that sooner or later, I shall give up government service for music. Don't think that I imagine becoming a great artist. I simply want to do that to which I am called. Of course, I shall not leave the service until I am absolutely sure that I am an artist and not a bureaucrat. Okay. He writes a longer letter to her in 1863. I just put the whole letter, or I put a lot of this letter here because I think it's a very interesting and informative letter. Tchaikovsky writes to his sister, I will now explain to you more fully what my hopes and intentions really are. My musical talent, you cannot deny it, is my only one. This being so, it stands to reason that I ought not to go leave this God-sent gift uncultivated. For this reason, I began to study music seriously. So far, my official duties did not clash with this work, and I could remain in the Ministry of Justice. Now, however, my studies grow more severe and take up more time, so I find myself compelled to give up one or the other. In a word, after long consideration, I have resolved to sacrifice the salary and resign my post. But it does not follow that I intend to go into debt or ask for more money from father, whose circumstances are not very flourishing just now. Certainly, I am not gaining any material advantage. But I first hope to obtain a small post in the conservatory next season as assistant professor. And what is most important of all, I have entirely renounced all amusements and luxuries, so my expenditure has very much decreased. So he's basically telling his sister, I'm going to get a teaching position and I'll be able to support myself. Plus, I'm saving money now. Now you will want to know what will become of me when I have finished my course, right? He wants to go study music. One thing I know for certain, I shall be a good musician and I shall be able to earn my daily bread. The professors are satisfied with me and say that with the necessary zeal, I shall do well. I do not tell you this in a boastful spirit. It is not my nature. I'm only telling you this in order to speak openly to you without any false modesty. I cherish a dream to come to you for a whole year after my studies and are finished to compose a great work in your quiet surroundings. After that, out into the world. Really interesting letters, right? He's opening himself to his younger sister, Sasha, who he had a very close relationship. And we can see his journey, his decision to give up his legal career to pursue music. Now, not all of his family members were entirely supportive. Now, Tchaikovsky's father was actually quite enlightened, and he was described by his children as enlightened. He did know his son had a talent, and he was not necessarily completely against his son in Tchaikovsky, right? Going into music, but he was concerned, like I think any parent would, how can my son support himself? Will he be successful? He's giving up well, in Chinese, we call it, iron rice bowl, right? This kind of iron rice bowl, 铁饭碗 kind of job, right, in the government. And his father had some concerns, but once Tchaikovsky graduated from music conservatory and then found a job teaching as a professor of music, Tchaikovsky's father became more, he didn't worry anymore, right? Because his son at least had this stable job at the conservatory, the Moscow Conservatory, where Tchaikovsky taught, okay? Now, Tchaikovsky's eldest brother, Nikolai, we know that he was not very supportive. In fact, Nikolai, and you guys remember, Nikolai, what did he do as a job? He followed his father's footsteps. He became a mining engineer. And we know Nikolai was not very supportive of Tchaikovsky's decision to give up the law. And if you remember, Tchaikovsky thought that Glinka was one of his musical heroes, right? And so Nikolai, in correspondence with Tchaikovsky, told Tchaikovsky, you shouldn't give up the law because you'll never become as good as Glinka was, as Mikhail Glinka was. And we know that Tchaikovsky replied, and you can see the reply here on the slide. Tchaikovsky wrote, I may not be able to come up to Glinka, but you'll see, one day you will be proud of being related to me. And I think Tchaikovsky, remember his celebrity status as a world famous composer in the 1880s and 1890s. I'm sure, well, what he wrote here came true, okay? On this slide, I just have some pictures for you about Tchaikovsky's pursuit of music. So after he left his civil service job, he enrolled in the St. Petersburg Conservatory of Music. It was founded, I think, in 1858, but it started accepting students in 1862. The main head of the school was Anton Rubinstein, who you remember was quoted in an earlier slide. He was the one that had said that pursuing a career in music is not necessarily seen as fully respectable in Russia. But Tchaikovsky enrolled in this Conservatory of Music, and you can see it was great timing because the Conservatory of Music started accepting students in around 1862. Tchaikovsky was one of the first students. The timing just worked out great, right? That this new Conservatory of Music, which was really one of the first places in Russia to offer a fully complete musical education, also not just teaching Russian music, but German music and Western European music and music theory was available to Tchaikovsky. And you can see here's a picture of it in the 19th century. And here's the current photo of the conservatory. It's still a Conservatory of Music. On the right, after Tchaikovsky graduates, he joins the faculty of the Moscow Conservatory. Here's the painting of the Moscow Conservatory, okay? And then he teaches, but eventually he's able to do composition full-time because a patroness, okay? His patron, Nadezhda von Meck, who was a very wealthy woman, and she supported a lot of Russian composers. And she and Tchaikovsky began a friendship, and she gave Tchaikovsky basically an annual stipend of about 6,000 rubles every year to support him so that he could do composition full time. Okay, and so he could devote himself to composition. They have a very interesting relationship, which is dedicated, it's not dedicated, which is preserved in letters, 14 years of correspondence, because actually one of the conditions that they agreed on is we'll be friends, we'll correspond, but the condition is we will never meet each other in person. So even though they had a 14-year relationship over letters, and she supported Tchaikovsky financially because she loved his music and thought he was a great musical talent as a music lover herself, they never met. They never met in person. Okay. So the last slide. What lessons as law students or lawyers can we learn from Tchaikovsky's life in the law? Okay. And these are just some of my thoughts of based on Tchaikovsky's life and his experience as a law student and as a legal official. What can we learn about his life and what can we apply about it to our lives as people in the law to make our lives perhaps more fulfilling? Well, I think a couple of things. I think Tchaikovsky's life highlights the importance of keeping your interests and hobbies even in law school, right? And your extracurricular activities, and not just to do studying full time. And I know some of our STL students are members of the choir, the Nanyan choir on campus, right? The second thing to think about is Tchaikovsky's life, I think, also shows that it's always a good idea to be open to alternative careers after graduation, and even after you've had some initial work experience in the law. The third point I would make is, as you can see from Tchaikovsky's life, even if you're in law school, and even if you think that you have no desire to be a lawyer after law school, it's still important to study hard and to work hard in law school, and consider even working as a lawyer or in any legal career, even for a few years after graduation, and do it well, just to see if it's something you like doing. So you notice from Tchaikovsky's life, he was a very good student in law school. And then after law school, he still worked as a civil servant, as a legal official for a few years, not long, but for a few years. And he, by all accounts, he also, well, except his brother, but his brother had that story about him chewing the paper, right? But his bosses respected Tchaikovsky and said he was a very hard worker, right? I think Tchaikovsky's life also shows us as law students and legal professionals the importance of having support, either from family, friends, or teachers. I think, and Tchaikovsky had some very difficult times in his life, but I think one of the things that helped him a lot, as it would help anybody, is his relationship, for example, with his younger sister, Sasha, his relationship with Nadezhda von Meck, his patroness, and the importance of people to support him and to speak with him and give him advice. At the same time, we should acknowledge that there are some limitations about applying parts of Tchaikovsky's life to our lives, right? So this is the last part of the slide here. First of all, Tchaikovsky had natural talent in music. That's undebatable. Nobody can dispute that, okay? And not everyone, of course, has this natural innate talent. The second thing is, of course, Tchaikovsky came from a well-to-do, wealthy family with status. And we should remember that as well. Not everybody has the luxury of giving up a career, right? A stable law job, for example, to pursue art or something that they like, especially if financially it's not doable, okay? And again, something to remember, especially for law students in the audience, so much of life is about sheer luck and timing. So much about life is sheer luck and timing, right? So Tchaikovsky was able to do a lot of the things, also I think because of timing. At the time that he wanted to leave his job in the civil service to study music, it just so happened that the St. Petersburg Conservatory was opening, and it was there, and it was a complete program. He met his patron, Nadezhda von Meck, who met her through letters, never met in person, but he had a patron who supported his composition efforts. So a lot about life is just also timing and sheer luck. With that, that concludes today's lecture. I hope that through Tchaikovsky's life, you were able to get some information or some knowledge that maybe can help your legal career or law student life. And if nothing else, I think it's always interesting to study a historical figure's own journey as a law student and as a legal official, okay? And I'll stop there, and I think we have a couple of minutes left. If anybody has any questions, I would be happy to answer them. Again, I'm not a Tchaikovsky scholar or expert, so I may not know the answer to your question, but I will, but if anyone has a question, I would be glad to take them now. So we have Meng Chao.
Good afternoon, Professor. It's lovely to see you after such a long time.
Yes, good to see you.
Yeah, it's really enriching lecture. And my question is about the power of the music. We all know that the music have this power to transnationally apply because it can disregard borders or cultures or languages. So my question is about the comparison between the music and law. Do you think that the values embedded in law also have this power to be transnationally applicable? Do you think there is universal values in law that can touch people without regard to the language, to the cultural backgrounds?
Well, I think so. Obviously, music probably is still more powerful because law ultimately needs to be expressed in language, right? And not everybody in the world speaks the same language, but music, it doesn't matter where you're from. If you can hear, right, everyone can appreciate music. But certainly there are values, I think, in the law, which apply everywhere, even in the practice of law, right? Law fundamentally is an interpretive enterprise, okay? And law requires interpretation. Not all statutes are clear. And even if the statute is clear, applying that statute to different facts may not be easy. And so there's always an interpretive aspect of law. Just like in music, there's an interpretive aspect of music. And in music, the interpretive part of interpreting music, performing it, that is, of course, one of the most enjoyable aspects of music. I think similarly in law, one of the most interesting aspects is also interpreting law and discussing with others and sharing your interpretation, right? So I think that there are some so yes, law does have cross-cultural power, but perhaps still not as much as music does.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Looking forward for our next lecture about music and law. It's really nice, actually.
Thank you, Mengchang. Let me see in the chat box. Okay, so let me just address some of the questions in the chat. Yes, so the recording, the Luing of today's lecture will be available on our Beijing 大学国际法学院 STL social media. Okay, and so just look out for that. I think the school will upload this recording to our Bilibili and YouTube. Well, I don't know about YouTube, but Bilibili definitely. Okay. Rosa, yes, please.
Oh, yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. And hello, Professor Ho. And it's such an honor to be in your class, and it was really wonderful. I just got admitted last summer, so I will be the class 2022 of STL. But I'm still feel very excited to be in your class again. And my question is, you know, it took Tchaikovsky some time to finally find out what his real desire or passion was. So, you know, we have different majors in our college, in our undergraduate education. And if we took take 4 years and study in law and finally find out that we are not really, you know, like law or want to be a lawyer, what will we do? It is really, you know, costly to find out what your real passion is, and the cost can be very high. Yeah, so this is my question.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a very difficult life question, right? And I don't have the answer, right? Because obviously everybody's situation is different. I think a couple of things, right? Tchaikovsky, he finished his education at the Imperial School of Jurisprudence. He graduated, he did well. He worked in the civil service. I suppose he could have gone to music school earlier, right? But he did all those things. I think, well, just using that part of Tchaikovsky's life, you know, if you're somebody who you're doing law study, right? You said undergraduate LB 4 years, right? Maybe your third year, somebody realizes, oh, I don't like doing this. I don't like it. Well, maybe if we look at Tchaikovsky's life, maybe one thing we can say is, well, maybe finish the program, graduate, and maybe do a law job, because, you know, studying law and practicing law are very different. And it may be that you may not really like law study, but actually when you start practicing law, whether you work as a legal official in the government or you work in a law firm, you may think, oh, this is very interesting, right? So it's sort of like Tchaikovsky, he goes to the civil service. Now, obviously he had a service obligation, so he had to go, but, you know, I guess it's presumably he could have broken the obligation, but he still went, he still tried it. And then, like that letter he wrote to his sister, he said, I'm not going to resign from my government job unless I'm sure that this is not something I want to do. So he still tried it. Okay, so I guess if we want to learn something from that, and again, it may not apply to everybody, but maybe it's, so, you know, try out of the job 1 to 2 years, maybe you'll like it. And then if you don't like it, you do what you like, whether it be music or art. And in terms of the cost, right? Yes, I think there are two arguments. One is, yes, you could say it's very costly because you spent 4 years plus at whatever 2 years. But then you might also say, well, that was still a good cost because at least I have a good degree. At least I have some work experience. I have a good reputation with my boss from that job. If I ever want to go back, you know, if the thing I'm doing now doesn't work out and I want to go back and let's say do law or something, at least I still have my law degree, I still have my license, And so if you think about it that way, it's kind of like 保险, right? Insurance. Okay? And there are people in the US I know who I had classmates and friends who said they went to law school not because they liked the law or anything, but they want to do something else. But law is a good insurance policy. That's what my one friend said. He went to law school, graduated, took the bar exam, practiced for a few years, and then did something else. He said, well, at least I have that experience and that law license. So if things don't work out, I can always come back and do that. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
Professor.
Good. And we look forward to, there are some other professors here, Professor Snyder, Professor Friedman. We look forward to seeing you at STL when you enroll. Okay.
Wow, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we're over time, but we can take maybe one more question. So Professor Friedman, okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Ho. I really enjoyed your presentation. And it's really, you're pioneering law and music in the same vein as Professor and Judge Posner was doing law and literature. So I think you really, you are up to something, and I hope you pursue this path further. And I see that you already do this. And actually, I saw one of my favorite composers is Sibelius, who actually lived not very far away from St. Petersburg, who also studied law. So that might be also interesting to look into. So basically, this was a comment, but so I hope you continue on this path. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Professor Friedman, and thank you for the Sibelius reference as well. And I think we're out of time for today, so I'd like to thank everybody here for attending. I'm sorry I couldn't get to all the questions. I noticed there's some in the chat, but my email is on the STL website. 我的邮箱在国际法学院的网站上 stl.pku.edu.cn. So you can find my email there. And if anybody has any questions or want to discuss further, you can find my email there and you can email me. Okay, thanks everybody.